Welcome to a Cars with Miles quarter mile review, where I give you the best and the worst of a new car I'm testing out and the time it takes for a Toyota Prius to do the quarter mile. Today we've got the Acura MDX Type S, and this is basically the most expensive Acura you can buy because the NSX is basically impossible to buy brand new at this point. Now there's a pretty good chance you're already aware of the MDX SUV. It's a pretty common full-sized family luxury SUV, if you want to call it that, but this is the Type S Advanced version, which means it should be pretty fun and sporty to drive while still offering a lot of those luxury amenities. Well, today we're going to find out. So what about this design screams Type S? Well, I guess that's kind of up to your own interpretation, but there are a few things to point out. We've got these pretty massive intake grills on the front. The front of this car is like 80% grill. And Acura doesn't really highlight how much having these bigger intake grills compared to the standard MDX affects performance as much, because keep in mind, this isn't some high compression NAV12 that needs to suck in as much air as it can possibly get. So my guess is that it's basically an aesthetic choice to separate it from the standard MDX models. But when taking a look at the rear, that's when we've got a lot more Type S-ness going on. You've got these quad exhaust tips on the back, and to my surprise, they're actually real. Here, I'll show you. And in between those exhausts, we've got this more sporty rear diffuser, which is basically also just an aesthetic thing. I'm pretty sure it doesn't do anything as far as actual performance is concerned. The Type S Advanced model comes standard with 21-inch wheels, and they're very Acura, and that's not to say they look bad by any means. I think they match the overall aesthetic of the car very well, but they've kind of got this lower end-ish plasticky aesthetic to it that I think isn't quite as premium looking as like something you'd find on a BMW X3M or an AMG GLE with some AMG spec wheels. But like I said, they still look nice. They're not bad at all. So all in all, the exterior of this Type S model compared to the standard MDX is a lot more shouty, a bit more bulbous in terms of the grills and trim. Basically, the A-spec version of this car went to go see Dr. S and got a little automotive BBL. Usually when I think about certain price brackets for a car, there are certain brands that are immediately taken out of the picture. For example, when thinking of spending $100,000 on a car, an Infiniti is nowhere to be found within my cerebrum. And so when thinking about spending 75 grand on an SUV, I'd normally say that an Acura is taken out of the equation immediately. But after a day or so into having this car, I'm starting to backtrack on that a little bit. This car, if anything, is built really well from a quality standpoint. In my mind, I'd be comparing this to a BMW X7, Mercedes GLE, Audi Q7. I guess you could throw the 7-seater Tesla Model X in there as well. The MDX Type S definitely stacks up for the most part. The seats feel very comfortable, very cushy, minus the headrest that feels a little stiff for whatever reason. But the controls, the door handles, the plating for the speaker grills, it all feels up to par for the price point. Let's talk about these seats some more though. Like I said, the headrest is a little stiff. It certainly isn't as accepting of your occipital as other European rivals I've tried, especially some of the Mercedes I've been in. But the overall comfort and bolstering is fire. You've got 16-way adjustability and 9 massage modes for the front seats. Now, when it comes to the massage mode in this car, I gotta say, it's really only in the event that you've been like walking around all day or like tired from working out, some like heavy duty physical activity where you get in here, turn the massage mode on, and it feels like it's doing something for you. I just came from my bed that I've been sleeping in for like 5 hours, so I don't really feel the need to turn it on, and if I did, it's just gonna feel like there's something pushing up against my back. It doesn't really feel like it does much for me when I don't necessarily need it. So I guess it's one of those things where it's there if you need it, but it's not really fun to play with if you don't. And another thing I like about the seats is the seat adjustability, not necessarily the way it feels, but the way you operate it. Normally when I'm in like other cars like Mercedes cars, BMWs, Audis, etc., I feel like I'm flying blind when adjusting the seat. I've either got the controls on the side like in a BMW or the controls on the door handle like in a Mercedes, but it's usually hard to tell exactly what's happening when pushing certain buttons just because I feel like they're not graphically labeled that well sometimes. But in this car, when you start messing around and adjusting the seat, you've got a UI that pops up on the screen that shows you exactly what's happening, allows you to see exactly what buttons do what and how it's adjusting the seat overall when it comes to the bolstering, the height, the tilt of the seat. all of that can be perfectly viewed on the display, and that is a really nice quality of life feature. I'm a big fan of that. It's truly all the little things that add up and count to make a very great experience overall. Something I've decided I absolutely hate in this car is the touchpad, which is what you use to control the display and the UI. I absolutely hate this. I don't know why they couldn't have just gone with a D-pad or something simple. It just doesn't feel intuitive to use at all. It's probably the worst like touchpad or UI control mechanism I've experienced in any car of modern standards, at least. I absolutely hate it, if I'm gonna be quite honest. I feel like I spend twice or 3 times as long just trying to navigate the UI just because I can't get the freaking gestures right in this car. Maybe I've got like Zoidberg syndrome, like, you know, the character from Futurama. Maybe my fingers just aren't compatible with this car, but I've tested quite a handful of cars, including being able to play with the Lexus LC500 that has something pretty similar to this, and I feel like it wasn't nearly as unintuitive to use as it is in here. I honestly just hope the next version of this car gets rid of this entirely. Just go with a D-pad or something simple, or just make the display itself touchscreen. I don't know why they had to do this. I absolutely hate this so much. It is probably the biggest downside of this car, if you ask me. So there's also a wireless charger in this car, and it's definitely great to have one. I'd say that's a standard for a modern car like this, especially for a $75,000 luxury car, but I've barely gotten it to actually charge my phone. I'm not sure if this press unit is just defective, but my suspicion is that it just requires you to have the phone line up with a very, very specific spot on the charging pad, because I have gotten it to work like 1 or 2 times, but it hasn't been very consistent at all. And I wonder if it's because this charging pad base area is just way bigger than it needs to be. I've got an iPhone 14 Pro Max, which is one of the bigger phones you could buy as far as like standard smartphones that people buy. I'd say it's probably the biggest, generally speaking. But this base pad here is almost the size of like an iPad mini. So maybe they could have made it a little bit smaller so that I don't have to always finagle the angle to get it to charge, assuming that is the issue and that this model is just not defective when it comes to the wireless charger. The car that I'm also testing simultaneously right now is the BMW iX, and I feel like they got it right. My phone fits right snug in the charging spot. It hits the charge every time. I don't have to worry about it not working. I feel like they could have done something very similar for this car. The sound system in this car is also solid, but not great necessarily. You get a very full sound, very clear mids and highs, but there's definitely some noticeable clipping in the bass department when you really crank it up. And it's kind of disappointing, to be honest, especially when you consider the price point and how much Acura hypes up this upgraded sound system compared to the standard MDX models. So this is definitely one area where this car falls short compared to other luxury car SUV rivals like the BMWs, the Mercedes, the Audis, etc. Yeah, it's not the best. The Type S-ness of this car really comes into play when you actually start driving this thing, especially when you consider the fact that this is a 4,800-pound SUV. This is one of the snappiest feeling 350 horsepower cars I've ever driven. 0 to 60 is in around 5 seconds, so it's not super car fast, it's not EV fast, obviously, but it doesn't feel slow either. And it truly does have a sporty driving feel all the way around. As far as handling, the secret weapon of this car is in the double wishbone suspension. This is a full-size family SUV that handles better than the average sedan. When taking bends and corners at noticeably high speeds, you've got very little body roll, and with the weight combined with all-wheel drive, you can drive this thing with confidence, a lot of it, in the dry, the rain, even a little bit of snow. Something I don't like about driving this car is aspects of the gearing. Even in fully manual mode, first gear is basically useless because it always upshifts on its own around 2,000 RPM. And yes, I get it. Most people are probably never going to use these little paddle shifters in the same way I do. But if you're going to give me a fully manual mode, let me do it myself. Don't cut me off early, barkeeper. The braking in this car is also quite good. All the speediness and handling doesn't really matter if you can't stop, and this car does that quite well. You don't have these huge 400mm carbon ceramic discs like you've got in the Audi RS Q8s and the Porsche Cayenne turbos, but I think you've got a very, very solid ratio of braking power to horsepower, and that's really all that matters. I've not once had a hard brake situation where I felt like, whoa, this is not safe, and I definitely can't say that about other SUVs I've driven lately. Mercedes EQS. Yeah, Mercedes EQS. Overall, 75 grand for this SUV is a bit of a wobbler. And what I mean by that is, while this is a very good SUV, it offers all the quality, comfort, technology, amenities that you'd expect from a modern SUV like this. I'm just not sure if someone who has 75 grand to spend on their SUV would go for something like this for the sporty driving experience, as opposed to getting like a sports coupe or sports sedan, versus spending maybe just a tad bit more or the same amount to get something that's slightly higher quality all around, like you'd find in an Audi Q7, BMW X7, Mercedes GLE, etc. But I think if you wait for these to drop around like 60, 65K on the used market with a handful of miles on them, and believe me, they will, I think this might be one of the best options out there if you want something that's modern, luxurious, and fun to drive, like actually fun to drive. That's basically it. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future content like this. Let me know what you guys think about these quick little quarter-mile reviews in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.